Boom. All right, there we go. All right, so cool. Christina, actually, would you like to introduce Lisa first? Because I don't think John has any context.
Yes, I do. And I'm just pulling one quick thing up on another computer because I'm going to move you to my bigger screen in 1 second. And actually, it's pulling up. Give me one quick second as the computers are operating. Come on, computer. You know, I think this is where it's going to come in. I'm just going to let it go for a second. But, you know, as you saw my computer, I think you were going to send me the clean up my computer.
That's what I'm grabbing right now.
Hey, can I have one of those?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, what this is pulling up. Oh, now it's actually working again. Great. Yes, I will definitely introduce Lisa and introduce myself and acknowledge it. So John, it's a pleasure to meet you. I was at Symposium last week and I had meant to meet you, and then after I left I was like, I miss meeting him.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Your face from across the room, or seeing it at some point, and there was such amazing people in that space.
Was that your first symposium?
That was my first symposium.
Yeah. I'm excited for the energy that you know, Deepen will kind of bring to that as well, and kind of learning from how you've done it. And it just seems like such an obvious partnership to create.
Yeah, totally. So I'll start with an introduction. So I imagine that Brian has shared about me and Deepen, and so the introduction to Lisa. Oh, look, I'm here. I'm joining this. Start audio.
Whoa, mute yourself.
Here we go.
That's what I just did. Okay.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Cool. We got you now on the bigger screen, and my team is going to come and join at some point. So Lisa is in Sedona, and Lisa joined me as my first, I would say the operating as a solo entrepreneur for a few years. And I brought Lisa on board in August of this past year, and really around my necessity of needing to raise capital, and also needing somebody who has the financial brain that I did not have. And so I got to outsource that to Lisa, and she is a wizard. Lisa has been CEO, CFO, COO of major companies and also startups throughout her career. And we are one of the entities that she works with on a weekly, monthly basis. So we're together 3 times a week, and she's based there in Sedona, and amazing, and helped to put together our financial performas and helping us with raising capital and keeping us financially fruitful.
Excellent.
My giggling is because of how aligned that story is with mine with John's.
Right.
You could
Nice.
start that, Brian.
Lisa, is there anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, and that is, you know, starting out at Stanford 35 years ago, working my way through technology companies. I only work with companies that matter. And it's an important part of my work, because helping those companies see the light of day when so much is out there that could keep them from doing that I feel like it's my personal mission. So I found Chris, and she has what it takes to really take this to the next level. So it's been a fun journey so far.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
John, would you like to jump in? And I can reflect Christina's story. John, I met John through LinkedIn thanks to some nifty AI. He joined Mythos as an advisor, and then I sent an email somewhat jokingly, which he then prompted as a project that we could work on together. That project was Spiritual Bro, which was conceived as a character on the Mythos platform, because we knew that we wanted to do something together. We knew that we wanted to create something. We knew that Mythos had some kind of value, but we also recognized that most of the financial models that we could move towards would change the intention, and we weren't sure what it was yet. So we decided that play, before we knew that play was the frame, was the way to go. And then now John is board member of Citizens of One, or the One Inc. Cooperative, and is also creating financial models and pushing me into my zone of discomfort, which is money, where he is endlessly comfortable. And yeah, John, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm an electrical engineer who turned into a CFO after September 11th. And really for the last 20 years have been a CFO or other executive at 5 rapidly growing companies, all of which went from single digits to 100 million in revenue. Most recently, I was the CFO of General Assembly, which is an education company that teaches courses in technology, business, and design. And before that, I was working independently for a bunch of different companies. So today I'm a co-founder and managing director of Assembled Brands, where I invented a new way to provide capital against the inventory of emerging consumer brands, and then raised $100 million for it. I would say, I'm a sucker for big visions. I was a CFO of Second Life, and that the vision of Second Life was to connect everyone to an online world that improves the human condition. The vision of General Assembly was a global community of individuals empowered to pursue the work they love. And at Assembled Brands, reinventing venture financing for the 21st century, because as consumers become more aware of what's in their products and where they come from, every single product in every single category will need to be reinvented. And it was, Brian helped develop that vision for Assembled Brands, and he and I have been kind of co-mentoring each other in lots of different ways, and very excited that we are founding the co-op, and excited to kind of work with you guys on it and have you help us have us collaborate in ways that will be beneficial to both of us. And that's sort of the real vision of One Inc. Cooperative.
Amazing. Thank you. What
Cool.
a fascinating life experience that you have. I've taken courses at General Assembly in New York City years ago, so I was very familiar with the development of that brand and what it offered to the entrepreneur community based in New York City. Yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
Stellar. I am going to share my screen so that we can jump in with some context. Move y'all down here. Sweet. So here we have the RSA. This is the Deepen RSA, I should clarify. The RSA originated from the discussions that John just mentioned. We were looking for a lightweight legal agreement that allows us to set intentions, but not confine what would otherwise be a statement of work. And then presume that, when you write the statement of work, you know what you're doing. A lot of times, as soon as you kind of get a little bit of the ways into a project, you realize, oh, we should be doing something differently. And the RSA is, simplistically speaking, making space for us to learn more as we go along. And so the RSA, which let's start there. This is kind of the Deepen specific aspect. So it was a hyper simplified version of an engagement document. So preamble, background, premise. So the premise is that Deepen is a belief-driven organization. One in Cooperative supports belief-driven organizations. And so we have a vested interest with Deepen as a citizen of one in making space for co-creativity and play and highlighting that through story. So getting work done, but also doing it in a way that, like this call, it seems that everyone present on this call is benefiting from the call by sharing stories, learning from each other, generally just opening hearts and chatting. So that aspect of things, even when there's resonance in a working agreement, it kind of just gets thrown away because it's part of the work. Versus in this format, we're saying, no, that's the value. Let's play in public. Let's let people see what we're doing. And also do work that is actually used and shown. So did you, before we go deeper, I want to make space for questions. Christina or Lisa or anyone Deepen, did you have any questions about this and reflections? Because as John mentioned, he said, help us. Every reflection that is given to anything that we document or any part of this process is helpful to the collective because it helps us to communicate more effectively in the future.
Well, I do have a question, and that is, in this anywhere, is it specifically highlighted the things that we would like to have done?
Not in this, but you see in the objective section, it says see Citizen RSA. The Citizen RSA is this document, which does have that. It's loading.
Okay.
There we go. So for the first month, these are the two most important focuses. The first is deployment of 1+ to reduce costs for Deepen, alleviate human capital so that all of y'all are more effective in doing what you're presently doing and bolster the marketing. We kind of assessed that this was the lightest way to get started and make an impact. And then copywriting and coaching. So helping you to have a message that is resonant with what Deepen is. Presently, the messages that I've seen you guys sending are very operationally focused. You're sending a text to let people know of something. But one of the things that we do is with Mythos. So for example, at one point, John interrupted me saying something logistical. Oh, no, wrong one. And he said, I was telling him how we were going to do something. And he interrupted me and he said, stop working on it, but keep doing it. And that stuck in my head, and it affected how I moved throughout projects, and it was very helpful. So I added it into Mythos. It became a story. Later, it became something within the spirit check correction, and it also became a t-shirt. I have the present in the work t-shirt came from that. So in this way, every conversation that we have, every conversation that you have with someone who's attending a Deepen event, literally every interaction becomes an opportunity for a story. And so helping you to chronicle these stories as a paragraph, putting them in Mythos, it's not broadcasting them out, it's not pushing them, it just sits there until it's available for context, so that when someone asks a question through chat, when they're asking about who a facilitator is, about the venue logistically, you're able to not only answer their question, but also share a story. So we'll likely get more into this later, but for the purposes of the first month, my intention is to show you how you can share stories in an operational communication capacity, so that when people come to you to ask about parking, you're also having a conversation with them.
Well, may I ask, and so our need is for underlying technology to be developed and deployed, which allows us to do things we can't do now. Stories is and I'll be candid, stories is a great word. With that said, it doesn't really describe what we want done. So where's the bridge between our operational need and your characterization of these types of things?
Yeah, great question. So the story aspect is bullet 2, the deployment and technology is bullet 1. And everything is augmented. So if you click on 1+, 1+ is 1+ is the name for the tech stack behind BrianBot. BrianBot was essentially the MVP. So the way that it works is that there's a Slack specifically for this bot. And what happens is that anytime someone asks a question, So for example, from Christina, and this is coming in from our database. So Christina texted this number, and it knew that it was her because she's in our database with that phone number. So she says, hi, how do I register? The bot said, oh, here's where to register for Symposium, provided a link. She asked a question, the bot knew how to respond, so it offered an answer. She then said something that the bot is trained not to respond to, and then it passed over into a Slack channel. So now if I respond as I would in a normal Slack message here, it sends a text message to Christina. If I were to instead respond over here on this right side panel, see Christina went for her phone, what this does is it trains the bot. So non-technical people in this format have the ability to train the AI. So every conversation that you have, you're basically having a conversation with a person as you would in Slack, but you have the opportunity to say, you know what, someone's gonna ask that question again later, let me train here. And then every time someone asks a question like that in that specific context later, then the bot has the ability to respond. So this is the human interface aspect of it. We also have a database aspect, which will allow us to, and that the specific function that we want to build for Deepen is that when someone offers information, so that could be their name, their email, or a specific degree of interest about a specific event, or, you know, Christine and I were joking about asking a question of what would you cross the 405 for? So being able to have that context and then have a broadcast of that question, and then have the AI then take all the responses from that broadcast and put them into the database, and then from the database being able to send out based on those contexts.
Okay, so basically it is an implementation of BrianBot for Deepen with a user interface that looks like this. So we have to man it, where our responses are teaching a Deepen bot the answers, and it's learning so that it handles things going forward, and it's already attached to our database, so it recognizes phone numbers and knows who people are. Is that fair?
Yeah, and yes, and this is the database side. So because we're recording, I've taken out all the contact info. But what it looks like is on the side over here, you go to a view, so stream safe, and then I say filter, and I can filter based on any of these conditions. So you can filter on people who are sober, people who are east side, people who are west side, male, female, whatever you would like. And you basically create a grouping based on filters of who you want to talk to. You construct your text message here. You say, hey, first name, this is, broadcast to that audience, preview. These are all the messages that go out. As soon as you send out these messages, any response to those messages will be answered by DeepenBot. And another function that we're building for Deepen, so these are the previous function, is something that we've wanted to build but just haven't had a reason to. Deepen's the reason. This function is basically when you send out from here and people respond, the AI will know what message they're responding to, and again, be able to harvest that context into this base so that over time, every conversation that you have, it's building the context.
Okay. So, Chris, we're gonna need someone who runs this on our end, right?
That's part of the teaching process too. And again, sorry to interrupt, I'll let you go before I go down that rabbit hole. Christina, did you have a response?
Thinking about how, thinking about how this all actually will work on a daily basis.
Yeah, this is going to be an intricate system for us to learn and to continue to I think somebody's role is going to be to operate this. So there's two things where I'll point your attention. One is, well, first are the things that you'll be looking at. One is this box right here. That's largely for the first month where you're going to be focusing. This will be curating and building. And then the other is Slack. Again, here just as a normal response, and here is where you'll be responding instead of text magic. Everything else, the intention is that as we are recording right now, and as, let's do board of directors meeting. So John and I hosted the board of directors meeting. We had a few of our citizens present just out of curiosity and interest.
And so it was live streamed and then uploaded to YouTube. So then now we have the ability to timestamp this and reference back to it. So what that means is, and the reason I share it is that as we teach you, we'll be streaming and recording and saying, this is how we're teaching you to do what you do, how to connect with people, and we'll be able to share that. We'll be able to build out our documentation to show you how to do this. And so our web of education on how to use this technology and also how to relate to people through digital platforms gets bigger as we answer your questions. So the intention is to build it, but then also document us teaching it to you, so that when we onboard another organization in the future, we'll have that.
Okay, great. And so what do you estimate the time, like this is for this to really work well, it'd pretty much be manned all the time, because questions will come up for which Deepen bot does not have the answer. Is that correct?
Yeah,
okay.
So the intention is to have Deepen migrated, I thought I put it in here somewhere, migrated from TextMagic and set up with equivalent functionality in the first month. Then to take all of the information that you have in your database, build it in your Airtable. So it's going to be built, the actual AI is in Dialogflow. That will be connected to Christina, your Google account, and you'll share it with us, so you own it. Also, what I shared here is Airtable. Again, your account, you own it. So taking everything that you have in MindBody and in TextMagic and unifying it in those two places where you own, getting that all set up, taking all of your things that you showed me in a Google Doc of responses that you have saved, teaching those to the AI. Also, one of the most likely ways that we'll do this is that you have a bunch of recurring events. And so the way that Dialogflow works, this is kind of an unnecessary deep dive, but so you can create, I'll find it for you later, but you can create layered context. So basically we'll create layered context for each event. So then if, for example, the location of a specific event changes, and this is I'm not promising, but a hope, is that in the database, we'll have all of your events and all of your locations. And then as the event changes, the time, the location, the facilitator, anything that changes, we'll be able to change it in the base. And then again, hopefully this is a first month thing, but if not, a second month thing. When someone asks a question, it's going to pull the information from the base rather than from what it already knows. And that way, when you want to update anyone who asks a question, all you'll have to do is just change it in that one spot, and it will perpetuate everywhere else when someone asks a question. Because I know y'all have a lot of sources of truth, and the intention is to create a single source of truth.
Yeah, and I think to what you're getting at, and maybe this is where, like for instance, someone's pulling up to an event tonight, and they're like, "I can't find parking. Have any advice?"
Right.
So the bot would then have to be trained to say, which experience are you attending? They would have to then write back dating and meditating.
Right.
And then it would source the information from dating and meditating to answer that particular question. So it's definitely going to be learning over time. Yeah. And, one thing that we're realizing too, because we're essentially supporting the development of an industry, we're actually then creating processes for the industry. So for instance, a lot of these experiences necessarily weren't consistent, or the facilitators or the guides of them weren't necessarily consistent in their work because they didn't have grounding to stand on top of. And so now that we provide them the grounding, we're kind of going to facilitators and saying, we need you to plan your experiences out in advance, which is something we're holding them accountable. So we're creating accountability within a marketplace to keep people consistent so they can thrive within it. So a lot of the data that we then to learn for us, I think this is interesting because it's a new feature benefit that is being added to Guide to be a part of the network. and that they're then receiving as like during the sales process, they're then receiving of this extra layer that there's this bot, the Deepen bot is going to learn about their experience, and the more that they can even give us for their experiences separately. So there's definitely many layers to the system.
Yeah, and adding to that, and touching back, Lisa, more directly on what you asked of managing, the beauty of this is that there's going to be a lot of manual labor in the beginning, because there's presently a lot of manual labor with what Christine and the team are doing with Text Magic and every other place where people contact them. But the beauty here is that every time you answer someone as you would normally answer a single individual, you're teaching the bot, and you're over time answering the same thing less. And so,
sure. How
am I parking? The easiest way to do that presently is what Christina just said. I love that you intuited that, is saying, how do I park? Where are you? Oh, I'm at this event. Okay, here's how to park at that venue. In the future, what we can build, again, this is the over time thing, is that we can say, all right, well, we know that they're registered for this event. So if they're registered for this event and they've asked where's parking, we should know that they're at this event. And so for dating and meditating, the best parking is. The other thing too is, and the texting is extraordinarily cheaper than what you're paying now. I think it's 0.00, I think it's 4 zeros and a 2 per text. So you're not gonna have to worry about the character limit as much. But one of the things that we do is Mythos is nonlinear communication. So if you have parking for a specific venue, you can have a memo that is parking for that specific venue. So you don't have to send them a long thing. You can send them a 2-sentence thing. Comical version. Someone asked,
would it be a link, you're saying?
Yeah, so it's a link, and then the benefit of the link is that, again, you're linking to a single source of truth, which means you don't have to continually update and retrain the bot, but rather you have these memos where, someone asked me, do you have a link for everything? And I was like, I appear to have a link for everything because everything makes more links. And you basically are able to just answer here, and then everything links back. So that's a thing, again, later down the road, we can start to implement more. But the intention is to human augment you, or augment your human, so that when you're answering questions, by the time you need to answer a question, someone has already gone through all of the previous questions that have been asked before. They've, okay, here's who's facilitating, here's their backstory, here's what I need to know about the venue, are dogs allowed? Oh, never got that question before. Cool, goes to a human.
And two, can eventually we, in future, could the guides start receiving questions for their experiences that they're training? So it doesn't necessarily need to be coming to Deepen. It can actually be coming into Deepen and being facilitated out to the guide, and they become responsible for training the bot or answering the questions for their own.
Yes. We talked about that, and there's 2 ways that it can happen. And both have different kind of functions. One is that I've been playing around with it. Again, much of this was developed in play, so it's fun to now see all of the opportunities that we can use it more productively with Deepen. One of the things is sending out a message to ask people a question. And so basically, I'll send a text message. So I'll send a text message that says something like, what are you still trying to prove to yourself? And then answer here, and I'll provide a link. And then this is tagged public. So anyone with the link, regardless of whether or not they're logged in or have an account, can edit this page. So there's that function, which I'll point back to in a moment. And then also you can tag specific collaborators. So if I remove the public tag and just have John, then only he and I can collaborate on this memo. So that's one function. And then the other is basically that's the wrong thing to share, but redirecting questions for a specific event to a specific facilitator in a Slack channel. So basically, again, this is a further future thing, but if, let's say, Yadi, if Deepen receives a question about Unleashed that Unleashed has not previously answered, that Deepen does not know, then Yachty will be added in this specific channel of this Slack to respond to that specific person. And over time, Yachty would only be responding to the 2 or 3 questions that are, you know, super random, that you haven't gotten before, that you don't know the answer to, that if this didn't exist, Nina would have to call Yachty and say, hey, Yachty, what I have someone asking what about? And it would bring them in directly. So yes, that's the longer term intention, more dev, but yes.
Right. And so, Chris, you would want to go through and interview all of the guides to get all these answers. Have them tell you frequently asked questions, basically.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Totally. Yes. And Brian, you know, this Mythos one, if we're using something like that in our community and we're linking to some page, can that page, instead of saying Mythos 1, say Deepen?
Up here?
Yeah.
It's maybe. Maybe. We haven't, it's still maybe. There's a lot into it in terms of, yeah, it's on the roadmap.
Do it.
Yeah.
You what? I'm sorry?
It's on the roadmap.
Our intention is to provide it later. Presently, my hesitation to say yes is that Mythos 1 is a part of One Inc. Deepen is a part of One Inc. So all the brands supporting each other is the intention. And so the kind of stronger together aspect of it. So I'd say it's possible in the future, but presently having it as Mythos enables us to promote you more. Because if anyone who's not logged in clicks this, they go to a landing page that says Mythos. That landing page then goes to One Inc. One Inc. will showcase Deepen.
Cool. I understand. I get that. And there's the pros and the cons of that. And I can say from my experience with MindBody is that, you know, MindBody created a challenge because they didn't white label MindBody. They brand it MindBody. And so now every time that someone goes, they're like, I already have a MindBody account. And I'm like, yeah, you have a MindBody account with, you know, Love Yoga, but you don't have a MindBody account with Deepen. And if MindBody had just white labeled it, we all wouldn't be in that same challenge of trying to suss it out. And at the same time, MindBody for sure does give, you know, gave us a stage in January to talk at one of their events because they, you know, branded it that way. But there's that, it's more confusing for the consumer of how all these fit together because that story isn't told to them. They're trying to purchase a ticket for something and they're like, where did I end up? I was at Deepen and now I'm on Mythos. Now there's one. And what is
I appreciate you sharing that. And it highlights something for me that all who have previously asked that question were not nearly as resonant as Deepen. And it was typically because the question came from a notion of possession, not a notion of supporting people and knowing where they are. And so yes, it's on the roadmap. There's some other dev stuff that we have to do before it's possible. And Mythos is still in alpha. So yes, it is on the roadmap. It just might not be soon.
Okay. Cool. And then how is, you know, we got the, you know, I saw the invoice for 5,000 and is that like, how do you envision us working together over, you know, as a member and over the long run? Like if we, you know, is like, what's the continuation of being a member or citizen at One?
So I'm grateful that you asked that question. John and I have been present in those conversations, and I'll show you this before I go down that rabbit hole. So this is One Ledger. Every contribution to One, be it a $5 donation at an event or a capital contribution with specific allocation to a project, is documented here, and this is public. Actually not the email addresses, but excuse me. So the intention is that when Deepen contributes financial capital to the cooperative and says, hey, we would like these functions for DeepenBot, and Spirit Studio, the entity that built the technology that Brian Plus is using, Deepen says to One, okay, we're gonna make a contribution. That contribution then goes to Spirit Studio to pay Nick, our developer, so that he can build the functions, the additional functions that are necessary for Deepen. When that happens, the value of those additional features on that stack of technology make the entirety of the cooperative more valuable. So your dev budget, where it would typically be an expense, is what we're seeing it as an investment. It's not something that you're paying for work. It's actually an investment into our technology, which we collectively own. So the documentation of it is really the only thing that we're still ironing. But the intention is that instead of you paying for services, you're contributing to something that you Deepen own part of. And so tracking that, and then basically also in this ledger is the expenses, or are the expenses of the cooperative, to say, okay, you put in 5,000, here's how much we've allocated to development to have Nick build something that Deepen is first using. And then if you say, you know, hey, we really want a logo for Deepen in the top left, then we're going to tell you, hey, we have $30,000 in dev budget, and this is a first version. So we are planning on our roadmap. Actually, this is all public. You just have to know where to look. So the Mythos One roadmap is more focused on catching up on our dev catching up on our dev that we have intended, and then building a user experience and user interface, because presently it's largely built for me, and making it so it's a little more easily understood by other people. And then that's also in there. So if you say, hey, we really want this, then we're going to say, this is what it's going to take for that to happen, and here's why. And then if you want to make a contribution and allocate it to that specific thing because that's the thing that you want, then cool. If you think that it's completely unreasonable, as you probably should, to pay $30,000 for your logo to be here, that is not because it should cost that. It's because that's our cost, and that cost is probably not worthwhile to you, which is why I say later. So it's about sharing context, because as Deepen being a part of the cooperative, Deepen also owns part of Mythos. And so we're going to share that information and say, hey, we want to build that as much as you do. It's not something that we presently can justify doing right now, because we have to get through all of this stuff to get to that thing.
Okay.
And Brian,
may I ask a question?
Is there also sort of, it seems like the 5,000 is like the dev budget. Is there, what's the ongoing hosting cost, or is that here somewhere?
It's not, and I meant to do it and I did not, but I will do it. It's going to be Airtable and a few other pieces of technology. I think Christine, I told you verbally that it would be somewhere around $80 a month of software that is your account that you own, and that's how much you would be paying. And then however much you're texting on that lower fee. So that'll be your ongoing cost. And then as far as what we're doing ongoing, if you want us to make more space for you from a dev perspective, from an advisory perspective, we're kind of going based on conversation right now, and figuring out a cleaner way of just saying, all right, you know, here's this line item, that this contribution equals that outcome. So we're building it as we go is the short version.
Got it.
So do you anticipate that so the 5,000 for the month would cover LionBot becomes an instance of DeepenBot, and we're trained on it?
Yes.
And so we've put away TextMagic, we've moved to DeepenBot, we're trained on it, we're up and running. And then beyond that, for this, there would be ongoing monthly fees. And then if we turned our attention to additional dev to do other things, then that would be something else.
Yep. And so in the process of doing what you just, in the process of doing exactly that, we will likely have a list of, we'll have a roadmap of like, oh, these are things we want. We'll be able to tell you how much dev each of those things will cost, and then we'll be able to move forward from there. So if, for example, you say we want this specific feature, and then we say, cool, let's look at it. And then we look at it and we say, actually, it's going to be this much. Then you'll have the opportunity to decide how much, if it's worth it to you to do it then, or if you're like, if you find someone else that also wants that thing and we can pay half of it and they can pay half of it, then we're into that. Or we would pay a quarter of that. And like, cool, when we have 4 people that want it, we'll let you know. And also if we commit to doing something and it's more expensive than we thought it would be, then we'll be able to come back and say, hey, it looks like this is going to be 5x what we thought it would be. Do you want to put it on hold and focus elsewhere?
So theoretically, we could get a group together to re-engineer MindBody for all of us.
I knew I liked you, Lisa. Yes, 100%. That's a brilliant idea that is very much like group buying ideology, and I had not connected that dot, so thank you.
Yeah.
In regards to like the 5,000, it's not necessarily like that. What I view this as, yes, the solving our text challenge is one of the things that helps us alleviate human capital. But as we're seeing in this promotion, in this like development of 1+ to reduce costs, alleviate human capital, and boost our marketing.
Yep.
I wasn't, and then the copywriting coaching and I wasn't necessarily saying that, but thinking that it's 5,000 for this. It's actually, it sounded to me that there was more support in this experience, as opposed to then just being so pin-tailed targeted on text.
So I appreciate the poke. So this is in progress, and John, you feel free to stop me if I'm saying anything too declarative. This is the ledger of contribution presently. After I sent you that invoice, I built a function with Zapier, which I love, so that anytime someone fills out our contribution form, it generates an invoice. Once the invoice gets paid, it adds to the ledger. So yeah, perfect. So too, are we doing time tracking? So basically Nick, our dev, is going to be working on this project. When he works on the project, he's going to submit his hours. We're going to approve the hours. The hours are then going to appear on the ledger and be billed against what you're contributing. So the intention is basically to be your in-house dev, so that when you say we want a thing, we're billing against that. Now, the other side of that is that it's basically paying costs as we are your in-house dev. At the same time, me showcasing Deepen and you at symposium or in the press that we get, or in any other way, picking up your call for a purpose that is not outlined on these 2 bullet points. It doesn't necessarily need to be outlined here to be something that we do, because supporting you is supporting us, and vice versa. So it doesn't necessarily need to be on here to be something that we do, and we can add things onto this. It's designed as a living document, so it's always changing. The intention is to support you, showcase that we're supporting you, explain why we're supporting you, and then support you in every possible way. If you, for example, call me and say, Brian, can you come and spend 3 hours in the office and explain this, wholly unrelated thing to me, I might be like, hey, this is the 3rd time this week, would you like to make another contribution so that I can justify the time? And that's about it. It's a conversation, and we want to support you as much as we can. In some cases, we're going to be supporting you without asking for a contribution, because we know that the contribution that we would ask for is greater than your budget, but supporting you would enable us to bring more budgets in. Or vice versa, we might be like, hey, this is something that we can't allocate time to because we're onboarding 10 other citizen organizations. It very much is designed to facilitate a conversation, in acknowledgement that, the relationship is the conversation, and we want you to talk to us throughout this entire process.
Cool.
Or, as we talked about before, we can bring more people into the co-op, right? And so
yeah,
if you are not planning to do something and we want it done, we can bring people in and cause it to be done, because so many people want to do it, and then it moves up and we all share the cost.
Yes, and I have this noted, but I appreciate that you said it, because you said it. The intention is to build our intention, and it's on the RSA, is to build one platform, being a collaboratively built and cooperatively owned version of MindBody. And one of the citizens that we have, he was at Symposium. He's a founding member of both Ticketmaster and Tickets.com. So he's the ticketing guy. He's kind of the reason that online ticketing exists in the format that it does. I've conveyed what
I missed him.
Yeah, he's coming back on the 2nd. He's doing a wine tasting. Hold on. He actually thought that wine was cool, and then decided to start a vineyard. And so he has a vineyard that he started called Geeks. There's a binary algorithm, or the binary code around the label. He's very, very nerdy. But the wine is not made anymore, and there's only I think 50 cases left in existence, and he's doing a tasting at Symposium. He's a lovely human. He owns hughotline.com. But he's a lovely human. He's exceptionally talented when it comes to ticketing. And he also has a longer story, but has a a desire to build something that unseats the ticketing infrastructure that exists. So I mentioned what we chatted about to him, and then he has messaged me probably 3 times since, being like, so tell me more about this ticketing thing you were talking about. So
Yeah.
getting him on board would definitely be a bigger endeavor, but again, longer term intention.
Cool. Is when it comes to, you know, being so there's citizens of one, and there's citizens obviously as individuals as citizens, and then there's organizational citizens.
Mm-hmm.
In the, you know, of the as you're bringing, like, how do other citizen organizations interact with other citizen organizations? So for instance, I asked the question, like, it sounds as though my perspective is that Deepen is one of the first organizational citizens of this. And I think
Deepen is the first to have the RSA. It's not the first organizational citizen. The answer to that question, I gleefully offer, but you have conveyed an unease for Slack. We have our Slack is where everything happens and where everybody communicates. Talking about the ledger of how things are tracked. Basically, everybody puts in their perspective, be they a citizen or an organization. Deepen already has a channel dedicated to it. So Nick and I were already directing conversations into this. So that is the presently best way to do it.
No,
That's the short answer.
I wasn't going with that question. I was actually going with this idea of, like, so Deepen's one of the first with an RSA. Mm-hmm. And so other organizations become on board it and are now part of one as well. How does the distribution of time and energy work? You know, I say it's one of the exciting things, it feels like for me, or for Deepen, is I'm like, oh my gosh, we're one of, like, the first to go in and be like, here's our money, here's our contribution, let's go. I'm just wondering if is the maintenance of the co-op, of how that container continues to foster so that, you know, we all still feel, you know, connected and integrated and actually can, you know, support one another, and that the values are aligned within co-op.
I greatly appreciate the question. I am not entirely certain how I can adequately reflect how that will happen, aside to say that BrianBot came about because of that reason. My second marketing agency was focused on selling access to a Slack community. Most of what I've done over the last 5 years is about community development and helping people to feel present and heard and acknowledged, doing it at scale, but not losing intimacy. That's where Mythos came from, was the desire to have something cogently and effectively conveyed and readily available for people to access through BrianBot, so that I can have the time to, as we have before, have long sit downs without, you know, a defined end. Because I know that all of the contextual and semantic things are handled by this technology so that we can have presence and space for serendipity. Symposium for the last year has been largely automated. The Slack is largely automated. Everything that we build for Deepen is also being built for BrianBot, which is helping to align these communities. So the intention
how about
is
this as an idea? What I think Chris is getting at is something that's a little more IRL, and which is Deepen's real strength. And so setting it aside as something to think about, how to bring this community together in real life, would be something that Deepen could really contribute to the activity. Chris, is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, that's okay. Great. Like, to know who's, like, because I felt myself of, like, all these other people are coming in, and then Brian's giving his attention to other people, and where's, like, you know, this, like, you know, so
get together as a community and work that out, and that's something Deepen would be able to contribute going forward.
Yes, and to both of you. And actually, after the Unleashed event last night, I was talking to, have you talked to Jeff? He was at the Valentine's Day event at Symposium. Yeah. He's lovely. We were talking and I started talking about this. I'm like, oh, tomorrow we're having this chat. And I reflected on like, I love Symposium. Symposium has been kind of like a playground for me to test. We did Future Self Party at Cross Campus Downtown. It was intended as a 200-person event. It was our first non-symposium event. It was our first paid event. I kind of already knew this, but I was reminded very abruptly that I'm not a huge fan of orchestrating events, and that the only reason I really like Symposium is because everybody makes it together. It's not something that's why I'm uncomfortable standing on the chair in front of the room at the beginning of it. And so I was reflecting on that with Jeff and realizing that like that was one of the things that we connected on as just founders and builders, is that your focus has been building the community and making the spaces, and my focus for a very similar reason has been the technology. And so me being able to bring the technology to you to support what you do, but at the same time saying, oh, you like doing events? Cool, like please, here's the context for doing events, and would love to have Deepen to facilitate Deepen and having other events, or there's a lot of ways that can represent itself, all of which are exciting. So I think two parts. What Lisa said is helping Deepen do more events, having groups that we have that want to meet, and having them in some form or name tied to Deepen. And then also, Christina, what it felt like you were saying is just acknowledgement. And I guess the direct response to that would be like, it's part of the relationship. If you don't feel like you're being acknowledged, say something. And that's in our agreements, is like, if you don't feel like you're getting what you need, speak up. And so if that means that you are, unhappy with a delay in responses, let me know, and I will either tell you why, and we can make space together, or just we'll communicate about it. And that One Inc. as a cooperative, One Inc. as an entity and a story originated from John and I having a year of conversation. He started funding Spiritual Bro as this thing to be built on Mythos, and then because my larger intention was to unify all of these things in one story, over the course of a year we started being like, well, what is this? Like we've co-created and we've played and we've built all of these things that we didn't expect to build. What is this? What is this? What is this? And the cooperative came from a year of conversation about what are we doing? What do we like? What do we not like? And a lot of very long conversations.
Hey, I'm going to have to jump in a few minutes at 2 your time, but how do we introduce new members to the co-op?
Inc.1 is the website, and then there's a join button. I have to check the email thing, but Inc.1 or Inc.1/immigration. There's a space in there to say how they found out about us. So that is the short answer, present version. I love that you asked the question. And
in the
okay.
last minute that we have too, what I want to acknowledge is that the $5,000 is a big investment for us at this point, as we're slated to we have a goal. We need to raise a minimum of 50,000, but 100,000 by the end of March, to continue moving in to continue the business and moving forward. And I know when we had this interaction around with John, and feeling as though John might be a great avenue for us to utilize through his connection, and you had said something of like an email that could go out.
Yeah, so very quickly, send us your deck. I know John would love to see it. You've already showed me. The intention would be to have your deck in Mythos, and then either John can write or I can write on John's behalf and have him send an email to say, hey, so-and-so who I haven't talked to, this company Deepen has become a citizen of One, part of our cooperative. They're in the middle of doing a funding round. I thought you'd like to take a look at their deck. So that's something, John, go for it.
Yeah, and then after I look at the deck, I think usually the next question is going to be, you know,
Show me
understanding
the financial model.
understanding your financial model.
I love that.
You might want to go to
Yay, I'll help you do that.
yeah, financialmodel.com. I definitely want to, you know, kind of look at basically the unit economics of the business and kind of, you know, how you're telling your story to investors and yeah, be as helpful as I can be. You getting funded is a great thing.
Great.
All right.
So yeah, so
well, I'm gonna jump, Chris.
Okay. Great. Perfect.
Gentlemen, thank you. It was super
Lisa.
wonderful. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Chris, we'll circle back later today, okay?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, right, bye.
Bye, Lisa.
Great. Yes, John, we can send over one of the things that we're going to look through the deck and just make any edits together as a team before we send that over to you. And then we'll walk you through it in that context of sending the deck out blindly to people. I think that more of it would come from a
oh yeah, that Brian was describing that in general. We got to see who's exactly right for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I can say this. I mean, that John has. I think my favorite, I think I told you this, is that I mentioned that someone got funded by Foundry Group, and I texted John to be like, oh, I met this person at a fundraiser, and his response was like, oh, I helped the founder of Foundry Group set up his fund. I'm like, are you talking about Brad Feld? And then like, as I'm asking that question in my head, he sent me an email intro to Brad, who I'd like idolized for 10 years. John knows a lot of people, but also in all of the conversations I've had about John, outside of John, like I'll be like, oh, you know, this human that I adore and I'm working with or whatever capacity, and then I send his LinkedIn or my memo of him. John is like a magic key and opens a lot of doors, and more so through Mythos when I get to talk about him and he doesn't have to talk about himself. And that's kind of the benefit of what we've been doing, is that like I can talk about you and Deepen far more fondly than you can talk about you and Deepen, because you are you and Deepen.
Great. So I can just keep doing the business and you can go raise us money because you can just talk about us.
Certainly a lot easier.
That's great. Sounds awesome. We'll just get back to work. You guys send us the money. We'll be good.
Hey, I'm going to say the same thing about you hosting events.
Perfect. Done. Trade. Deal shake.
Speaking of which, the New York Times photographer is 100% confirmed on the 2nd. So I was seeing Yadi last night, and she's a character. Anyone that you can think that, Nina, if you bring your guitar, just like walking around with your guitar, all of these things are visually more appealing to have a photo that is then converted into a newspaper clipping. So anything that is visually appealing, any energies that are like super abundant, those are the people to invite on that specific day.
Maybe we could take a note and send it to all of our guides and encourage them to come and bring their gifts and their physical gifts too, because they look great in spaces, and wear their bedazzle and come and have an opportunity to be featured in the LA Times or New York Times.
Yeah, and just to not overwhelm her, I'd say like notable press, if you want to, or I can send you the list of people who will be there and art that'll be there. So that you can, I mean, it's already pretty notable on its own. So I would say keep the New York Times aspect in spaces where it needs to be used to influence people.
Cool. Do you want to send maybe a little blurb that then Nina could potentially use to send out to make invites?
100%.
Yeah, because even if like, you know, I can see some of them wanting to walk around with their sage and
will the context of the article be the same, similar? It's just a continuation of men's spirituality, or?
It's the same article. That was the start of the article. There was a comment that was made that was like, oh, symposium should be the story. So at this point, it's somewhere between the two. And I've been watching who she's been talking to. Her writing is fantastic. She's a lovely human being, so full trust. But we and the PR team's like managing her as they know how to do. And we're just kind of like, cool, like we're going to put you in our space and we're going to surround you with this energy and we're going to trust you to do your thing. It's one of our big frames is I trust you to be an adult.
Cool.
Great. Okay. So, from a timeline perspective, like when's a good time to start?
As soon as you're ready. Nick is finishing one last dev project for us, and then as soon as he's done with that, I think he'll be ready today or tomorrow to jump over to Deepen stuff. Should be able to get you ported from TextMagic within probably a week or two. That part's going to happen pretty quickly.
Can we keep the same number?
Yeah, I have to look at TextMagic, but based on the fact that you said you purchased it and you could port it out, I'm reasonably certain, and that would definitely be a goal because that'd be a pain in the butt to transition.
Unless we can get some number like that means Deepen, like 444. They love 444, 33333. Something.
You can do that within Twilio. So we'll set up all your accounts, and then you can purchase a number. We have two, one for testing. But yeah, I mean, that's Twilio. Dialogflow is owned by Google. Twilio is owned by Twilio, which also owns SendGrid. Like we talked about this before, of like where you build your house, you're having a relationship with the land. And as much as I'm not a huge fan of Google as an organization, Dialogflow is owned by Google and is extraordinarily stable, and they have a ton of dev budget because they're Google. TextMagic, on the other hand, if you do some research on, I haven't done yet, but like they're not Google. So being cognizant of where you're building so that you understand, as you do with MindBody, that 24-hour support, they know you. It's a good choice for now.
Cool. Okay, and also to clarify, because I think Lisa was saying, it's not the I don't look at the 5,000 as like, here's a month.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think to me, it's not confined to any particular time frame. It's confined to like, here's our first contribution.
Yep.
To the
Yeah, and it's written as we will invest equivalent capital, and that capital includes financial, natural, all the different 6 types of capital. So again, it very much is a conversation. If we want to request an additional contribution from you, then you're going to need to feel like you got enough of a contribution for that 5. And so our goal is to have you contribute again, and communicating to you, all right, here's what was done. Natural capital, Nick, also John raised, this much money, also the intention is long-term relationship.
Great.
So, but it's open-ended so that we can have space for that.
Because I know too is we also talked about interim CMO type work as well, and to support us in like the brand strategy and marketing of Deepen and how we and talk about it. And we also received a proposal on Friday, which I believe I shared with you.
You did. I went through that. I went through it, but I didn't have enough context to respond.
Yeah, you didn't have enough context because he didn't really put much here, in like our conversation cannot be articulated into this. Our busyness isn't articulated in this, I would say. I also think that it's not really clear on the deliverables. But that's a phase that we're seeking to, and I don't know if we need to go in and spend another 5,000 to 12,000 with an agency or a freelancer or even a team of people to do that outside of potentially the one cooperative. And it's something that we are seeking to discover and solidify our internal external messaging, and be able to communicate about Deepen cohesively.
I think that's something that we can make space for from a conversational standpoint of what is Deepen. And Chantal and I have had several conversations about like, go to the mystery experience. Oh, we went to this thing the other night and it is. So having a brand book and having a solid understanding of how to communicate is extraordinarily helpful. You have a thriving community, and so you have the ability to solicit reflections from that community. So I don't know this person, but it might not be necessary now. I know other projects, as I told you before, I've did marketing, kind of interim CMO stuff, but mostly growth hacky stuff for companies between seed and Series B for 4 years, all throughout LA. There were companies that raised a ton of money and then said, cool, we're going to spend all the money, we're going to do this dev, we're going to get a brand book, and yada, yada, yada. It's one way of doing it. If you're tight on capital, I wouldn't suggest putting it there early on. It seems like you have enough people to have conversations with to get reflections in that way versus hiring an expert to tell you. If I don't know if he's attending events, I would say have him attend events. I certainly have a much better frame of what Deepen is after attending 8 events. I figured out that it was 8 last night, and it was from Unleashed to Unleashed. But yeah, from an interim CMO perspective, my intention with the RSA is like, there's a very clear thing that we can do right now, which is alleviate your costs with text magic and make space for us to build cool stuff for you. So that's the intention now. As far as like an interim CMO thing later, our intention is to make space within Spirit Studio to say Deepen would allocate whatever equity or allocation for that position to that agency, and that agency includes these people. And so that structure enables us to say, all right, for that allocation, you get these individuals, and these individuals are providing their expertise, their support in this way, versus relying on one person and then presumably vesting it over time. You're relying on a collective of people. But again, we would want to have a relationship first, and it doesn't seem like there's a need to document on paper unless there's one that I don't know about, to do that now, but that's certainly the intention.
Okay.
Date before you get married is kind of the thing I always go with.
Yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, I would love to get to have a separate conversation about marketing strategy, and really talk of like kind of map out a plan for us of what, you know, because we have seeds planted everywhere. We've you know, and two is looking at money first off of like, you know, where's our what space do we have to, and what's the time frame to then begin investing in a media buy? What does the media mix look like? What is the right message to take out?
Here's
like, yeah, so kind of getting more clear on how we're communicating with our audience, and the strategy around that is exciting, and it's something that I think like we're inside like not ready to. We want to be really thoughtful. I could say in the past we've been in survival mode.
Yeah.
So being thoughtful at the next steps, and at the same time I don't want to get stagnant and stay still because I'm not quite sure exactly, we're not quite sure what to do and where to invest the energy in the right spaces.
I think the right frame for that is going to be the, you know, if I get a chance to look at your financial model and understand kind of how the business works. I mean, the first thing I did as the CFO of General Assembly was take over the marketing department.
Oh.
And I did, you know, and then kind of got that functioning. It was sort of, you know, it was transitioning from being like a brand industrial complex that was restricting creativity and to something that was quite metrics driven. And so that, and the integrated financial model sort of lends itself well to being, you know, extremely metrics driven and take into account sort of, you know, your limitations from a balance sheet perspective too before you raise capital. So the sooner we look at the financial model, the more helpful we can be there.
Okay, great.
Well, and he says,
if
go for
you
it.
end up, if you both are available, because Lisa and I have calls scheduled every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we could on Wednesday, we have our call scheduled from 1 to 2, and Lisa can walk you through the financials if that's
Friday might be better for me.
Okay, Friday the 12th. Can you do the 12 to 1?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Friday. Yes.
I might be mobile at that time in the car, but I can tune in through audio.
Okay.
But the financial model stuff, I'll be listening, and that, yeah.
Yeah, and but John, you'll be able to be by a computer because we'll actually pull up the.
Yeah, I actually strangely already have it on my calendar.
So that was the introduction to Lisa was slated.
Yeah, cool. So that's perfect. So Friday, we'll walk you through the financials, and we'll.
Does your financial model include your actual historical financials as well?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
And so we'll aim to send you the deck, and we have a great deck. We just keep changing it constantly, as you'd imagine. So we're going to fine tune it, and then we'll send you the deck prior. The goal will be to send you the deck prior to that call on Friday at noon.
Okay, sounds good.
Stellar. Cool. And yeah, Christina, let's have that conversation. I hear what you're saying, so let's continue chatting about that, because I think with marketing symposium and then a lot of stuff like One Inc, and we're telling a lot of stories that we're not quite sure what those stories are. So that process of kind of continually changing it and seeing like, oh, how does this resonate with these people, and learning how to listen to signals of people asking questions and then adapting it. Let's chat more about that. And I think over the course of this first month and just kind of diving in, a lot of the stuff that you want to talk about will just naturally come up, and we'll probably discover some answers for it too. Great.
Amazing. And one thing that too became apparent, and I maybe this is already your brain has already gone there, but it was interesting of venues, because we're constantly always seeking venues to host experiences at, and especially getting them off the ground. We don't have the large venue budgets to spend, something like Mystic Manor, which has an overhead of $40,000 a month. Like we
for an event, or just in general?
Just in general, to like keep that venue going. So what I was, as you're thinking of exchange and co-op and sharing and other ways of working together is, for instance, tonight we have an experience at a home, and generally they like to make money off of their experiences. And they said, we don't have money to pay for this one. The event itself doesn't make that much money. And also coming to a realization, like what we do have is credits to Deepen experiences. Yeah. So we have another source of exchange that can be shared for contribution of people that support the growth of Deepen.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it previously, but the intention in my mind is a system of, okay, cool, let's build a system where when you go to a Deepen event, you open up a window and it's, here's the event, you go to pay, and you pay in two ways. You pay in residence dollars, or you pay in other forms of capital. Other forms of capital, it's like, cool, here's how much the ticket costs with money. Here's how much the ticket costs with volunteer hours, and here's how to get, vetted as a volunteer, and so on and so forth. And so each event, you basically be able to say, here's how you can participate, you choose. And then having a venue say, hey, we want to contribute to our space to the cooperative. The space is going to Deepen, but that venue gets credit that they can then exchange for marketing of something else, or having, any variety of things. The intention is to have this mechanism of exchange communicated cleanly, so that we can all kind of benefit without, being locked in these one-to-one exchanges where, you say, well, we have a venue, we need a venue, but we don't have cash. If that person is not willing to take your, what otherwise would be a barter, if that venue doesn't want tickets to your events, but instead they want marketing services, then you can't do anything. But in this format, it would open up to it. So multi-party exchanges.
Multi-party, cool, great, amazing. Well, thank you. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts? To be continued.
To be continued.
I'm going to touch base with Lisa and then in the team, and we'll be back in touch.
Beautiful. Talk to you all soon.
Pleasure to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you. Look forward to coming to your events and meeting you maybe on Monday.
Definitely on Monday.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Monday. Cool. Okay. You're in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're not dragging you out tonight or tomorrow.
No.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.